Yes, there's like a little chat room sort of a thing, and people can.
Skype or something too?
No, it's just accessed through the internet, through a website.
And somehow the questioning, typing in, is all part of it. Once you get into it, somehow you.
Yeah, you go to the. Yeah, we're having an audio check here. We're having a non-audio check. What? Oh, for level? Oh no, the level's fine. See the level's too loud. Yes, this is me checking the level. You can't hear me. Okay. Well, you could hear me just a moment ago. Yeah, you can tell online. It varies anywhere from 3 to 30, or different numbers of people. But it's very easy. The website is free. You just go to it. There's a link on my website to get to it on the events page, and you can just go to it, and then you don't need to log in, and you can watch the webcast. And if you want to participate in chat, you log in for free. You can just be any made-up handle, and then you log in, and then you can participate in the chat if you're interested.
So there could be people watching that you don't know because they didn't log in.
Yes. Oh yeah. Sometimes there's events on Saturday. Sometimes there's events on Sundays. Yeah, different times. No. These are the only two public events in Berkeley. Is the 2 Wednesdays a month. Is it time? It's time? Okay. Good evening, everybody. The modern spirituality is a bewildering field. We're inundated with all sorts of paths and traditions and philosophies and religions, and they recommend all sorts of different strategies to try and achieve various things or avoid various things. And it can be quite bewildering. Many spiritual paths recommend purifying yourself, generating non-attachment, generating compassion, causing your thoughts to stop, stop thinking thoughts, all these various things. And as if there was something that needed to be changed, or something that needed to be approved, or some special state that needed to be achieved in order to realize whatever the spiritual goal is being defined as in these various traditions. I'm here to tell you that absolutely nothing needs to be changed. Our spiritual dilemma is actually that we are not clearly and accurately seeing what this is. We're not noticing what this is. It's already happening here. What's happening here is reality. This is it. This is the finish line. This is the completed and the perfected state. It always has been. It always will be. It doesn't need to be improved. It doesn't need to be purified. It doesn't need to be modified in any way whatsoever. And yet, because of the nature of the way all this works, it seems to be amenable to being misperceived, to being misinterpreted. And our problem is not what this is or what we are, but that we may have fallen into the habit of misinterpreting what this is, thinking that it is other than it actually is, which causes confusion, suffering, and all sorts of dilemmas. So, that being the case, all we actually need to do is notice accurately what this actually is. Notice accurately what is already the case, what this actually already consists of, and we will discover what this is, we will discover what we are, and we will discover that this condition is astounding. It's beyond our wildest fantasies. It is inconceivable. And what is going on here, what we are, what this is the goal of spirituality. It's the goal of the spiritual path. And it's already achieved. It's already the ongoing condition. Always has been, always will be. All we need to do is notice that fact. So you may ask, how do we go about this noticing? Well, fortunately, no matter how confused we are, no matter how deluded we are and how caught up we are in misperception and misunderstandings of this event here, the actual bona fide real event is always happening. Reality is always present. Reality is always accessible. Reality is always immediately displaying itself within your experience. So even if you're caught up with all sorts of misinterpretations and these sorts of things, there is the direct presence of reality as the energy of our experience, as the consciousness which perceives our experience. All these things are spontaneously present. We aren't doing them. We don't need to do them. We can't stop them. We didn't start them. They're just here. There's just, light is showing up in consciousness in your field of vision, right? And sensation is showing up in consciousness as your field of touch, and so on and so on and so on. Thought is showing up in your consciousness as your field of mentation. All of these events are happening spontaneously, and we can't stop them, can we? We can't change them fundamentally, can we? We can't start them. We can't. In other words, this event is doing itself autonomously. It is being itself. We don't need to do it. We don't need to do reality. We don't need to make time flow. We don't need to make the sun shine. We don't need to make gravity pull. These things are happening spontaneously. And this spontaneity is the actual condition of everything. And it is, of course, immediately apparent within our experience. So, we can notice this directly. However confused we are about things, and we may have our thoughts whirling around, and we're thinking this is this and that's that, and so on and so forth, at any moment you can go to a portion of your experience where that is not the case. You can, look out the window at a cloud, look at a tree, look at a bird, look at the wood grain in the floor, look at light shining from a light bulb. Look at any of these things, and they are immediately what they are. They are not a concept. They are not an idea. They are actual. And this actuality is the actual condition. This actuality of being reveals itself nakedly, constantly in our experience. So we have access to it. So even if we are in the habit of getting all caught up in interpreting, I'm Peter Brown and I'm a human being and I live in Marin County and, we're in a hellacious political situation and there's overpopulation and blah, 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 all this endless narration and brainstorm. That's happening in my experience, perhaps, okay, but that's a relatively small part of the real estate of my experience. If I look at the full field of my experience, there's vast areas that are just present radiant energies. There's light presenting itself as vision. There's this miraculous sound presenting itself. There's all of these energies which are unstoppably, spontaneously present that we have access to, and all we need to do is have the wherewithal to direct our attention to them every once in a while and notice, wow, this is really interesting. How is this happening? How is sound appearing? How is sound showing up in my consciousness? How is light appearing? how is it being perceived? And again, not intellectually, not analytically, but just by being very directly with the immediacy of these phenomena and feel what they feel like, feel their texture. Explore your experience texturally, explore it qualitatively in terms of its substance, in terms of the inherent qualities that it actually presents very, very immediately and very experientially. And all of these events are not conceptual events. These are not ideas. These are immediate, well, let's call them immediate energy presences in our experience and as our experience. And they wholly bypass all of this conceptual whirlpool that we may, find ourselves drawn to and habitually engaging in, because they exist outside of that context. They exist autonomously. They exist spontaneously, and they're not concepts. They are not ideas. They aren't something we're thinking. They are not true or not true in any conceptual sense. They simply are. And what is this being? How is this being? What does it consist of? We can approach these questions very, very directly because it's right here. It's right here. It is revealing itself very, very nakedly as our experience. So we have access to these things very, very directly. And this is the easiest and simplest spiritual path I can recommend. I commend you to play with it if you find yourself drawn to it. We can have some discussion if you'd like. There's a microphone, if you wouldn't mind speaking into it, not because we need the PA in this little room, but because there are people online. That way they'll be able to hear what you say. And, I invite you to, as we sit here, just feel your experience, feel the texture of experience itself. Feel this being happening, the light shining, consciousness perceiving. It's effortlessly just here. It's just happening. And, as we talk, we have conversation, or we're sitting in silence, this being is the ever-present context that all this is happening in. And we are that. All this is that. And what this actually is nakedly revealed and is a truly astounding condition that's beyond our wildest thoughts, beyond our wildest fantasies. And it's right here. It's just simply this.
Hello. Okay. I had a discussion today with a friend of mine, and it started out as a technical discussion and ended in a philosophical discussion. And I just want some clarification because we were talking about spiritual goals and objectives, and this person believes that he can manipulate his conscious mind to help him live a better life as well as to grow spiritually. And I just wanted to get some clarification about conscious mind and if it's anything that can help us or if there is a conscious mind.
Well, that's a deep topic. We'll bypass for right now if there is a conscious mind, and go to the question of is the conscious mind manipulatable? Is there any advantage in doing that? Certainly, the conscious mind may be manipulatable. You can learn to speak Greek. You can learn to, play the piano. You can learn how to run your computer. These things are doable, and yet, how do they happen? What's doing them? Where does it come from? I mean, suppose to say you can learn to speak Greek is one thing, but where does the wanting to learn to speak Greek come from? And if you want to get more profound, where does the facility to learn to speak Greek come from? And this gets into the question of what is the conscious mind? The conscious mind is an aspect of this profoundly mysterious functioning of consciousness, isn't it? It's a facility of functionality that shows up. It shows up as a spectrum of what we call thought, conscious thought. And how does this happen? Where does it happen? What's it made of? What's doing it? These questions, in my opinion, are at the root of manipulating and exploring the conscious mind. So I would suggest it's less valuable to train the conscious mind like a trained SEAL to be able to do this or do that, which may or may not be advantageous. It may be advantageous to learn to speak Greek. You can get a job where you're translating Greek or something. I mean, who knows? But from a spiritual point of view, the real advantage in exploring the conscious mind is to notice what it is, notice how it works, and the conscious mind is the tip of the iceberg of consciousness itself. And as we notice, well, what is thought? Where does it come from? What's doing it? What are these forces that put thought there? And thought has a very mysterious quality of instantaneously appearing and instantaneously vanishing. It's like the bouncing ball in the sing-along movies, that show you what words are. It's like you're thinking the thought you're thinking, and then it's gone forever, and then you're thinking the next thought, and So the dynamism of thought is fascinating. What's thought made of? Where is it happening? How does it appear? These questions are profound, but they're also fairly obvious, or let's say fairly accessible, in the sense that they're happening right here in your experience, so you can actually look at these things. And I would suggest ultimately you may get a lot more mileage out of that kind of a root investigation than out of training your mind one way or another, which may give you advantage in practical terms and in coping terms, but in terms of discovering what this is, penetrating to a more fundamental level of the phenomena and noticing that, I think will be more powerful. Because then ultimately you'll discover that the conscious mind, instead of just using the conscious mind, you'll discover what it is, and in discovering what it is, you'll discover what you are, which is the goal of spirituality.
It seems as though we have spent most of our lifetime engaged in the conscious mind and habit forming and that kind of thing. It seems that way, but I guess how can we say that, right?
Well, that's a small part of what's been occurring for sure, right? But again, we may have a kind of a myopia where we focus in on the conscious mind as if it was the only thing going on. Oh, I'm thinking this and I'm zoomed in on that. But again, even as we're engrossed in the conscious mind, that's really a fairly small portion of the area of our field of experience, because there's all kinds of experience that is not the conscious mind that are always going on, whether or not you're absorbed in the conscious mind. So you may be absorbed in thought, absorbed in ideation, but your field of vision is still full of light, and that's not a concept. Your field of hearing is full of sound, and that's not a concept, and so on and so forth. And then there's various subtle mental energies which we experience, moods and vibes and flavors, and we don't have names for these things. And they aren't a part of the conscious mind. They aren't thoughts per se. They aren't, semantic kind of manipulations.
Okay, thank you.
So again, we may be in the habit of focusing in on our conscious mind, but in actual fact, we're sort of zooming in and magnifying a relatively small portion of our full experience, which is always ongoing.
Okay, here's a question. Can a conscious mind exist without an unconscious mind happening at the same time?
Well, this is kind of what I was referring to earlier. The conscious mind exists in a context. What context does it exist in? And we can call it unconscious mind, we can call it consciousness, we can call it being, we can call it various different things and look at it from various different angles. But what is this context? And the context is always there, whether the conscious mind is there or not. When you go to sleep at night, your conscious mind sort of fades away as an importance in your experience, and yet your experience doesn't disappear. It goes into different sort of textures and different sorts of qualities. But the background, the context is always there, whatever seems to be in the foreground. And so the conscious mind is one of the modes of our being, one of the modes of our consciousness. But consciousness itself is always there, whatever mode is present. So in other words, if the conscious mind is present front and center, obviously it's occurring in the context of consciousness. And designating conscious mind versus unconscious mind and all these things is just a bunch of theories and spin doctoring. We can look for ourselves and see what these actually are.
From another listener, a viewer, how is it possible to know that awareness, consciousness, is not only an activity of the brain and completely dependent on it, and therefore finite?
Well, it's whether or not it's dependent on the brain doesn't mean it's finite, because the brain is infinite. So even if consciousness is dependent on the brain, it's still the supposition that makes it finite is pretty silly. I mean, a brain is made of matter, which is made of quantum phenomena, which is embedded in the very being of the universe, which is fundamentally infinite. So. And these kind of questions are kind of like questions of how many angels can dance on the head of a pin. You know, we have to start empirically with our actual experience. That's what we have to work with. And experience is the fact. Things like brains and all that are possible interpretations of this fact. Brains occur within experience. If there was no experience, we wouldn't know that whether or not there are any brains, and we don't even know whether brains objectively exist, because suppose we were dreaming all this, or this was being dreamed somehow, then brains and bodies exist in the same way that a body exists in the body of someone you dreamed about last night. And you wake up in the morning and you can see there was no body there, and there never was a body there, even though it looked like there was. What if brains exist in that way? In that case, how can consciousness be dependent upon them? But again, all of these kinds of questions are just sort of theoretical, pie-in-the-sky questions, and they don't address the immediate fact of our experience itself.
Okay, a follow-up on that. First there is consciousness, and then there is brain, ? Maybe the brain is a symptom of consciousness?
Well, as far as we can tell, experience is the fact, and consciousness is an abstraction that we invent to suppose the mechanism or the medium of experiencing. So we have this fact of experience, and then from there we can draw all kinds of abstractions out. We can draw abstractions of, there's consciousness. We can draw abstractions of, there's objects. We can draw abstractions of, there's bodies. We can draw the abstractions of, there's organs of the bodies, and the brain falls into that kind of category. So manifestly and obviously, brain exists as an object of consciousness. You know, the only way you'll ever see a brain is in your consciousness. The only way you'll ever think about a brain is in your consciousness. So, in terms of any way that we can approach the whole issue, experience comes first, and then brains or no brains is, as the case may be, is a phenomena within that consciousness. The whole world is a phenomena within consciousness. We wouldn't know that there was what we call the world if there was not consciousness. So consciousness comes before the world, and bodies exist in the world, so obviously consciousness comes before bodies, and so on and so forth. But the point is to be empirical, the point is to be practical, to start with certainty. And the certainty we have to start with is experience. The only immediate fact we have access to is the fact of experience. Experience is happening. And then all of these other ideas are just different interpretations of what that means, or what that implies, or how that's happening, or how that may be happening. All philosophies and all worldviews are just different abstractions, different abstract explanations or interpretations of what's going on with this fundamental fact of experience. But experience is the fundamental fact. You don't know anything you know anything about exists within your experience. If your experience wasn't there, these issues would not be there, obviously.
Okay, they got it.
I'm trying to get a feel for what the experience that it feels like you're speaking to, and what's an experience that I've had. For example, you exploring new country, and you're off by yourself, and for me this experience just unfolds. And there's a real continuity about it all, and is there anything from your experience and what you're speaking to? Is that something like what the experience is?
Well, certainly. We notice that our experience is always unfolding. Right here, we don't know what's going to happen in the next instant, but there it is. It just presents itself spontaneously. We don't have to do it.
Yeah.
We don't have to create our experience. It just spontaneously unfolds and seems to develop. And yet we can notice that it has very many mysterious aspects that we may not be used to acknowledging. For example, it has this curious property of being instantaneous. The future does not exist, and if we look closely, the past has disappeared. What was happening when I started this talking with you just 60 seconds ago is gone. Where is it? It's vanished. So there's this interesting property where the present is continually vanishing instantaneously. Mm-hmm. The future, so-called, let's say, is instantaneously appearing instantaneously as the present and then vanishing instantaneously. And then, if we look at the present moment, it is literally instantaneous. It seems to have absolutely no duration. Okay. And yet there's this faculty of a kind of a memory that enables us to perceive it as a continuity. So I can remember to some extent what I'm saying as I'm saying it, so I can remember what I started talking about in this sentence, and so that it can have some degree of coherence, maybe, or not. Okay. For example, and this is just a way of indicating that this ongoing experience right here has properties that we may not be used to noticing because we think of it in simplistic terms or in materialistic terms. I think oftentimes the sort of modern materialistic worldview, we sort of picture the world as this big, stable, inert environment that is pretty much there and is there going to be there tomorrow and was there yesterday, and we think of this as some sort of a objective continuity, and we think of ourselves as a small material entity wandering around in it that somehow has this perceiving ability. But in actual fact, if we look closely, the only thing we can find is this ongoing, spontaneously occurring experience, right? And the world is disappearing every moment. The world is reappearing every moment.
Right.
In fact, experientially, and this is our actual reality, the actual reality of our condition.
Okay.
And if we notice this, that gives rise potentially to a whole new way of relating to and understanding what's going on here.
Okay, and so I'm saying to myself, so being there and really interested in what's happening, and it just unfolds.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we are with it as it is endlessly interesting because it's always surprising. We never know what's going to happen, even slightly. I don't know what you're going to say next. You don't know what I'm going to say next. You don't know what your eyes are going to light on in the next moment. So there's this endless stream of surprising information constantly coming and disappearing and then being replaced with another surprise. So, it gets boring and dull and static only in our imagination when we think, oh, I'm just sitting in the Hillside Club and it's the same as it was last time I was here and how boring, But experientially, the actual real-time experience of being here is a stream of complete surprise, a stream of complete spontaneity, and it's endlessly fascinating, endlessly entertaining, endlessly meaningful, because there's all sorts of qualities and suggestions and implications subliminally present in experience that just appear, irrationally perhaps, many of them. And when we notice this, experience is seen to be this rich, luscious, surprising, and ungraspable, literally infinite phenomena that's just absolutely mysterious and vital and vibrant and meaningful and profound. And this is, really very self-evident when we just are with the phenomena itself nakedly.
And surprises showing up at every turn.
Yes. Yeah, unendingly, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know what's going to happen. And we don't even know what is happening. Even in the instant, it's like, what's happening here? I don't know, It is, but we can't grasp it, We sort of grasp it after the fact of, I can count how many people are sitting here and, blah, blah, blah. But in the instant of just bang, it's just all here, and it's surprising and open-ended and very, very specific. All the information is presenting itself very specifically with incredible detail, and yet simultaneously and paradoxically, the detail that's presenting itself, I don't know what any of it is. It's not cross-corresponded. It's not labeled. It's not tagged. It's not, there's no. The mind has to sort of work on it after the fact and assimilate things and say, oh, yeah, you're wearing a blue shirt. But the blueness and the shirt are there, bang, as a fact, but it's way beyond blueness and shirtness. It's this astounding, barrage of incredible detail and information, and it's just, it's just inconceivable bandwidth and surprise and real presence. It's really there, but exactly what it is that's really there is astounding. Is not. It's not simple. It's not a simple thing, and we can notice this astounding richness. everything is so very present. Our experience is so inconceivably present, isn't it? And yet, what is this presence? How does it happen? This presence is mysterious, but it's so obvious, so extremely the case. Everything you're experiencing is right here, and yet, what is it? What is it? What is this presence? What is this quality? It's amazing, and simultaneously, it's very unfindable and ungraspable. It's very present, but you can't say for sure what it is. You can't say for sure what anything is. We're very intelligent. We can say a lot of things about, what we think we're experiencing. We can have a lot of descriptions and analysis and labels, but if we look very closely, it's mysterious. We can't say. It's a mystery. We can't say for sure what is this presence. We don't know. What is this light? Light is amazing. I mean, it's completely obvious and present. There's light always present in your field of vision. Even if you close your eyes, there's light present. You go to sleep, there's light present. You dream, there's light present. What is this light? What is it? It's right here. We can look at it. This is it. Just look at this light. It's obviously present, but what is this presence that the light obviously has? And what is this light? What is this incredible energy? Energy, what does that mean? What is it? What is it? It's right here, and we can look at that, and we can see how astounding it is. And most fundamentally, we can notice it's not what we're used to thinking it is. It's real. It's actually happening, and it is beyond our ideas. It is beyond our normal conceptions, or abnormal conceptions, for that matter. We can't get our heads around it. We can't look at light and say, "Oh yeah, I get it, light. Okay, now I know what it is." It's literally a miracle. It's this miraculous presence in consciousness, and we can't say what it is. But it's right here. We can see it. We can be with it. We can commune with it. We can let it show us what it is non-verbally by experiencing the texture of this experience. And in experiencing that texture, we are experiencing the miraculous. We're experiencing mystery. The obvious and immediately present fact of mystery.
It seems to me that in exploring the way you're describing and suggesting, the difficulty, for lack of a better word, is that the conditioned mind, the habits of thinking that we know what we are experiencing is very strong. Mm-hmm. And while for me, it seems sometimes it's easier to get into the exploration, and then oftentimes the conditioned mind comes in such a way, it's almost like from the back door, mm-hmm. and sort of like in the back of the mind saying, not consciously saying it, but saying, "Oh, I already know what this is," mm-hmm. which blocks the exploration. Maybe not stop it, but certainly blocks the direct exploration. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to hear what you might, just comments on that.
Yeah. Well, if we notice carefully, the conscious mind and our conscious thought and the subliminal tendency of certainty, i.e., of thinking we know what things are, doesn't actually stop the immediate presence of the mysterious fact of experience itself, which of course we don't know what it is. And so it's really a question of noticing that, of being able to, I'm just looking at light. It's just light. The lights are on. Of course it's light, But so a concept can come up, a certainty a sense of certainty can come up. I know what this is. It's boring. It's not interesting. What's going on that is interesting here? But even as that happens, there is still the actual and immediate experience of the phenomena itself, and it is possible to notice that, to notice the actual presence of the phenomena, and to notice that it does not conform to our simplistic ideas of what it is. And again, you have to find yourself through luck or grace or fortune or whatever in a condition where you have the ability to do this. If you find yourself just caught up in your worldview and your interpretations of things without getting out of it, then that is a difficult condition to be in. And so then, if you are still drawn to this kind of investigation or any kind of investigation, you have to, struggle with yourself, struggle with your habits perhaps, or retrain yourself, or hope for grace to get the trick of being able to bypass it, or stumble, or just play with it and stumble on tricks yourself. Because there's lots of tricks, there's so many tricks. All the spiritual practices are full of tricks, meditational tricks, yoga's different things. For example, distractedness is a wonderful trick, to sort of just let go of everything. And all of a sudden where are you? Well, you have to sort of rouse yourself to say, oh, I'm in the Hillside Club and blah, blah, blah. But when you just let go of it, you aren't in the Hillside Club, you're just here. Yeah,
and that does happen also, and
sure.
And I cannot, make it one way or the other. I mean, like you said, just for easy communications, grace. So, accepted. But I just want to go back to my original question a little bit. I think it's not so much the sense of the thought that comes in and say, "Oh, I already know," because that's easy to catch actually. That's such a gross object, so to speak. The thought of, "Oh, I already know." It's more the sense, the feeling sense of knowing, of conditioned knowing, that I find to be the filter that blocks the actual exploration that I am interested in. But I really feel like it seems like I'm not touching what the thing really is because of this filter sense of knowing. That's the sense that I don't know how to deal with.
You retrain yourself through familiarity. When you find yourself having a direct contact with your experience, so to speak, or direct noticing, that is non-conceptual and that is outside that context of certainty, every time you do that, you will have a certain familiarity with that, and you will ultimately build up a familiarity with that and have more and more access to it. And again, even if you have the habitual mode of slipping back into the sense of knowing what you wish, because we're not talking about conceptual, we're talking about these worldviews exist unconsciously as a kind of a feeling tone of
exactly what I'm
of
saying.
What we feel like we are, what we feel like this is. And so you can address, in terms of playing with it, you can address that feeling tone on the level of feeling tone, because direct noticing has a feeling tone too. Unknowing has a feeling tone. It's a very profound and powerful feeling tone. And the more you access that sense of unknowing, the more familiar that feeling tone will become, and it is self-validating. You feel this and you feel, yes. You may not know what it is, you may not be able to get a handle on it, but it is certainly what it is, and it has a quality. And this quality is very intimate, it is very profound, and it is ultimately very powerful. And so we're kind of retraining ourselves, perhaps, in sensitivity to this feeling tone that is other than our feeling tone of identity, the feeling tone of, oh, I know who I am, I know what this is. Not as a thought, but as a sort of a texture of how we hold our energy, you might say.
And I have tasted the immediacy of that unknowing way of experiencing, which is which is why I could also then know when I'm experiencing through the sense filter of knowingness.
But you
And-
can
and
you can
like
taste it. You can taste it right now. You can taste it right this instant. You can taste it any time, and the more often you do, the more easily you'll be able to. And this is the very nature. This is the meat and potatoes of the spiritual path, is acquiring a familiarity with this mysterious flow.
You know, when you said you can taste it right now, at that moment, I suddenly the thought just popped into my head. Maybe I'm just having some idea of what it should feel like, or something. Maybe I don't know, because when you said that, I thought, really? 'Cause I kind of doubt that I am.
No. Look, this is not a thought. That's not an idea. That's real. That's not an idea. You feel that in your body. That's not a concept. That's not an idea. So you maybe have all kinds of ideas and thoughts and concepts, but
A clap,
at the same
a
time,
sound.
there's this immediate presence, which is this is not an idea. The light you're seeing, your field of vision being full, is not an idea. This is not a concept.
Maybe I'm having some assumption and making it more complicated or
Yeah.
more mystical
Yeah.
than it is. Because of course we are experiencing.
Yes.
Experiencing is happening. I mean, who can
Experiencing
deny that?
is happening, and most profoundly, it is not what you think it is. Whatever you think it is, it's happening, it's real, it's right here, it's immediately revealed,
Yeah.
and it is more than you think it is. No matter how sophisticated an idea you have of what's going on here, it's beyond that.
Right.
And it's nakedly and accessibly beyond that. And so this mystery, this stepping outside of your certainty, is always immediately obvious because it's displaying itself. And again, you may find yourself caught up in ideas, and you
The
keep going back to
labeling
them.
happens.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
But again, labeling is not the opposite of reality. Labeling happens within reality.
Right.
I can say this is a chair, and as I can say that, and I know that what I'm talking about is an absolute unknown, mysterious presence in experience, and the experience is absolutely unknown and mysterious, and the way it's happening is absolutely unknown and mysterious, but I can still call it a chair.
Right.
And I can sit in it. I can say I'm sitting in the chair, but I don't know what sitting is. I don't know what I am. I don't know what the chair is. I don't know what space and time are that it's happening in. I don't know what experience is that it's all showing up as. But so labeling is not the opposite of reality. It occurs within the context of reality. Conceptual thought is not the opposite of reality. It occurs within the context of reality. But the context is vaster and bigger than the concepts. The concepts are little things. Reality is inconceivable.
I'm sensing that we do this all the time, and we're not aware of it. And it might be we stop to smell a rose, and we're being with what is in outside of time. We stop to pet a dog, to smile at a child. And I'm feeling that there's that definite shift that's taking place as you have these kinds of experiences.
Yes, certainly. Exactly so. You're exactly right. We always are experiencing reality, and we even always know we're experiencing reality. You see a beautiful sunset. Yeah. It's inconceivable. It's just it's mystery. It's majesty. It's astounding. A flower, a face, another face of a human being. Just, you look at the sun, you see a cloud, you hear a bird singing. And all these things, we all know that they're amazing. Even if we're simultaneously caught up in our thinking and our arguing with ourselves or whatever, that is happening as a small portion of the full field of our experience, which also includes all these amazing and immediate mysteries.
But it feels to me like the mind turns off in those moments. It's like you're being in the now, and the mind is.
Sure. Well, yeah, but again, it doesn't actually necessarily turn off so much as a matter of what we're focusing our attention on and what we're noticing. Mm-hmm. Mental events are always happening to one degree or another, but we may be. It's a good analogy might be like a television set that's on in the corner of the room. If you're sitting there, the television set is obviously only a small portion of what's going on in the room, but at the same time, your attention may be drawn to it, and all of a sudden, you're sucked into this tunnel vision around the television. And I think it's similar to what frequently happens with our conscious thinking. Our thought actually takes up a fairly small portion of our experience. I think if you look, you'll find this true. That thought, let's say the bandwidth of your thinking has its own sort of a field or area or spatiality. These words don't really apply in our experience. And simultaneously, we are seeing, we are hearing, we are having all the other experiences occur, and they are also taking up area. And the one doesn't cancel the other. When thoughts are happening, you don't stop seeing. Light doesn't stop happening. Sound doesn't stop happening. They all happen concurrently, each in their own sort of, in other words, they don't get in each other's way. They don't impede each other or block each other. They sort of happen concurrently each in their own space. And so even if we're in the habit of being sucked into our conceptual thinking, the rest of the field of our experience doesn't stop. It's still there. And again, it's a matter of the proportional weight we have. And when we have these spontaneous noticings, we notice a flower, we somehow get out of our thoughts and are just with the immediate presence of our experience, we're shifting our attention, perhaps, the focus of our attention from this stream of conceptual thought and argument and narration to this immediately present other energies that show up in our experience. But this is our great opportunity and our great advantage, that reality is already present and we already have access to it. So it's not like, and this is the very core and essence of spirituality. It's not some great thing where you have to meditate for 40 years and go to the Himalayas. It's just simply noticing what's going on here, and we actually are. We have access. This is doable because we're already doing it. We just need to learn to shift our emphasis slightly to notice, oh wow, all of this is happening. Even if I'm embroiled in thought, simultaneously, but this is happening too. And just that little gentle reminder, and eventually it becomes easier and easier, and we really get the full context of our experience. And when we see the full context of our experience, we see its miraculous nature, that this experience should be showing up at all. What it's made of, how it's appearing, how it's being perceived. These are stupefying, astounding, just really, really, really inconceivable. And it's obvious and self-evident that that's the case. And all we need to do is just notice that fact, and we are plunged into the mystery of what this is, the mystery of what we are, and we discover that we actually exist wholly beyond the human situation. We exist wholly beyond our narrations. What's going on here is wholly other than people are saying that it is. And it's immediately apparent that it is, and we have access to this because it is showing up always in our experience. We just need to notice. It's a little small thing, just noticing. Wake up and smell the flowers.
When you say that it's always showing up in our experience, it's the non-thought part of our experience. Is that right?
Well, thought is it too, but it's easier to go to the non-thought portions because it's more obvious. We're used to believing our thought, so if you go to thought, you're liable to just get caught up in the content of thought. But of course, thought is very mysterious too. What is thought? How's that happening? What's that made of? How is it being perceived? So thought is equally mysterious. Thought is an astounding phenomenon. But typically, it's hard to notice how astounding thought is because we accept it so gullibly on a narrative level, on a conceptual level, that we don't notice how astounding it is. Whereas if we go to a relatively non-thought portion of our experience, like experiencing the texture of light, or seeing the sun, or hearing a bird, or for that matter, hearing a car drive past, it may be easier to notice, wow, this is really interesting, how's this happening? Because we don't have a conceptual investment in it. We're not so caught up in a narrative regarding it. Whereas when we go to our ideas, we're really used to spinning around with them, and so we just might get swept up into that whirlpool. But once we become sensitive to these textures of energy, the textures of experience, and can easily appreciate that, once we can then apply that to thought. When we have a little more skill, a little more facility with appreciating the texture of experience, we can see thought is an experience. Thought has a texture. Thought has a substance. Thought is as mysterious as any experience. It is as miraculous as any experience. But generally, I would recommend, yes, do your homework on things that are less challenging, and then as you develop more and more facility, then you can go into the lion's den of thought and see that it is the same thing.
Thought seems to have more sensation than the naked experience.
More sensation than what?
Than the raw experience, the experience which doesn't have any narratives or thought. It
has more sensation?
Yes.
Luli, slap her. No, slap. There's some sensation there.
How is it different from that? How is your thought different from that? Have a thought. No, it's not extreme. Okay, you tell me. It's not.
Yeah, I am talking about everyday thought. I mean, thought has sensation.
Yes, thought has sensation, certainly. But all experience has sensation equally. And the point isn't that it has sensation, but what is sensation? What is sensation? I mean, does light have sensation? Do you have a sense when you look at a light? Do you have a sense that it has a sort of a texture or a quality to it?
Yeah, I mean, I can look at that light, and that's...
And you hear the sound at the same time. You look at the light and you're hearing sound, and sound has a different sort of a texture than light does, doesn't it? And yet, in some ways, there's a similarity as well, isn't there? Mm-hmm. And so you can look at these, and these are not concepts. You can look at these things. They're actual qualities of experience. So you can experience them directly and feel what they feel like and let them show you what they are.
Okay.
Okay, there's a comment from the internet. Maybe we are just completely addicted to thought and believe it without question.
Well, many people are, but do you have to be? It's because there's plenty of non-thought experience present, and you can be addicted to that as well.
I think I'll play too. I know exactly what Susan's talking about too. I mean, it's like when you talk about light here tonight, I mean, it's like suddenly for the first time you really see light. But ordinarily, we don't. We don't see the light. We don't feel what's going on around us because our thoughts are so interesting. I mean, they think they've just taken over so that that's all you really are aware of.
Yeah.
And then like to let go of that, which is told us what our world is, and it's told us who we are and what's going on and how we should react. I mean, there's just so much invested in these thoughts determining how we view the world that like to kind of put that in on a back burner and to be far more cognizant of everything else is a dramatic step.
Yeah, well, and this is a barometer of one's spiritual condition. You know, spiritually, when we're more spiritually immature, when we're more spiritually naive, we are really interested in our thoughts. We're really interested in all this, and we buy into it, and we completely accept it, and we don't even question. You know, of course, this is the way it is. You know, everyone says it is. The newspapers say it is. The internet says it is. Of course, you know, it's all true. You know, but then when we begin to get a little more spiritually mature, we begin to question things. We begin to get more interested. We begin to be a little less interested in these simplistic narrations and a little more interested in revelation of, wow, look at that. Here's something that's just, you know, we become more interested in newness. We become more interested in investigation. Maybe we started as conceptually, we might like follow science stories or follow stories of astronomical discoveries, I don't know what, or artistic endeavors, you know. But at some point we're reaching a little bit into mystery. We're reaching a little bit outside of the context of just a same old certainty, yeah, I know what's going on thing. And we're, wow, look at this, there's something here. Or we start getting more interested in art. Art is mysterious. People that are drawn to art have art is not conceptual. Art is not just a bunch of ideas. Art is mysterious. It's textural. And so we may start to have inclinations in those directions as our spiritual funny bone starts wanting to be itched. We start spontaneously being drawn to investigate other areas of our experience. And as this process proceeds, as this unfoldment proceeds, we begin to find, wow, this is really interesting. And ultimately we get to a point where thought is really uninteresting. Thought is really plebeian. It's really a very small, simplistic mode of functioning relative to this vast textual experience that we are always in, that we always are. And so there's a transition that happens gradually from this simplistic sort of fascination and investment in thought and into gradual development of appreciation of the richness of other aspects of our being. And this process does itself, you know, but this is what it looks like, is this sort of a, you know, it's like when you're a 13-year-old girl, you still have a lot of dolls in your room and all that, but you start sort of being interested in fashions and lipstick and boys and things like that, and you're sort of in two worlds. You know, you still have Barbies or teddy bears or whatever, but you also are, you know, listening to rock bands and have posters of rock bands on your walls or whatever, right? So, and you're not really in one world or the other. And eventually, spontaneously, as time passes, and you don't pick up the Barbies anymore. You know, they don't hold the fascination for you that they once did. And this is the natural process of maturing, and this also occurs spiritually, where we become more appreciative and more interested in our experience on other levels, so to speak, than just this more simplistic conceptual levels. and then the smallness of identification of ourselves. And we discover that mystery is much more luscious, much more nourishing than identification, than certainty. But this is a spontaneous process that does itself. You know, you don't take a 9-year-old girl and take away all her dolls and make her up and dress her up and say go out and get a job. It's silly. It's not. It's like cracking the egg and tearing the chick out of it and saying, okay, grow up. Here, fly, and you throw it out there. It's not going to work. These things do themselves in their own time. And it's exactly the same. I mean, spirituality is not something we need to beat ourselves up about, because we are what we are where we are, and we're in the process of going where we're going. It's already happening. So we're actually sort of like interested, or maybe not interested, but we're spectators of the whole process, watching it and saying, wow, isn't that interesting where I am?
When you first started talking about noticing, it took me a while to connect with that, because I didn't know what I was really looking for, what I was noticing. But the first noticing I did was to notice that that experience was not what I thought it was.
Yes.
And
that's the very essence of noticing.
And that wasn't just a thought. Prior to that, I could have said it, and it was a thought. And I was pitting one thought, I'm noticing this, against another thought, I know what it is. And noticing is not a thought.
Yes.
And then after that door opens, then other things can open.
Yeah.
At least that's my experience.
Yeah. Noticing is direct experience, and it's not conceptual. Like I was saying earlier, this is really happening. And that actual happening is not a concept, it's a fact that exists immediately in experience. So it's accessible, it's obvious, it's radiantly present. And simply being with that radiant presence, the radiant presence of experience, the radiant presence of phenomena, is noticing. And when we are present with this astounding radiant presence, we see that, wow, there's no way I could get a handle on what this is. There's no way I could accurately describe this. There's no way I can just come out with a soundbite or a paragraph that's going to capture this even vaguely. And yet, it's totally accessible, because this the immediacy of experience, the immediate presence of this amazing presence, is unstoppable. It's right here, right now, always.
So last night I was reading this book that was considered itself to be Advaita book, and it said, there was one sentence that says, life takes care of itself, and then it didn't explain it. First of all, do you agree with that?
How could you disagree? If life isn't doing life, who is?
Okay, well that's my first question. And my second question is, yesterday morning I had one pill left. And I got the pill, and then I realized then they called, and they said my prescription was filled, and I went down and picked up my prescription. And a couple of days ago, this lady fell down, and she said, Frank, I can't drive my car anymore. I was thinking about giving it to you. And so I went down to register it. And I had no idea what it was going to cost me to register it. And the lady said, okay, that'll be $87. And I thought, do I have $87? And I looked at my wallet, and here I had $100. So I gave it to him. And it's just things like that have just been happening. And it's almost unreal. Can you say anything about that?
Well, the way everything happens is almost unreal, isn't it? I mean, there's this ongoing cascade of events, what's happening now and what happens in 5 minutes, and, when we're done here, you're going to get up and you walk out that door, and, one thing's going to happen, another's going to happen, and it's all kind of doing itself. It's kind of like, what you opened with, life is doing itself. All this event is doing itself too, isn't it? And it's all the way it is, and we can't even say what that way is. We can't get a handle on what's actually happening. You know, we can't pin it down. We can't describe everything. You know, it's just a sea of mystery. It's a sea of ongoing event, and that event is fundamentally mysterious. No one's doing it. No one knows what's being done. You know, we're just being swept along by this stream of events.
Yeah, and another thing that happened this morning, this woman, wanted me to go see Hal with her, and she said it's coming sometime, and I've been searching, and I had coffee with this guy today, and he hands me this paper, and it's about the upcoming Hal movie. Boom. And I said, well, thank you. How'd you know I was looking for this information? This is just something else, man.
Yeah. This happens sometimes. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes it doesn't. But it can be a sign of grace. It can be a sign of spiritual achievement that our life begins to sort of straighten itself out. We spend less time banging our head against the wall and tying ourselves in knots, and more time just going with the flow, and things may seem to come our way to some extent.
I hope so.
When you say mystery, are you relating to the symptoms of mystery or the mystery of all its symptoms?
I missed that last part. Say those last words.
Or the mystery of all its symptoms.
Both. Mystery is a fact, and mystery displays or reveals itself through its symptoms. The fact of mystery is this. This is actually happening. And what it is, calling it a mystery, means that it is infinite. It is open-ended. You cannot delineate it. You cannot draw a circle around it. You cannot define it. You cannot pin it down. You cannot capture it in a description or a narrative. So this is fundamentally a mystery. You look at it and it is definitely what it is, but you can't say what that is. You can't grasp it. You can't find a final version of it. You can't finally say, "Oh yeah, now I get it. It's this." And so this is to me, this is the very essence of this idea of mystery, of unfindability, of ungraspability, and yet it's present. So it is mystery. It's not mystery in the sense that it's a fantasy or a delusion or imaginary. This is, and it is mystery. It is open-ended. And this open-endedness and unfindability and all that could be said to be symptoms of the mystery. But the mystery nakedly reveals itself as such through its immediately obvious quality and character, which is this open-endedness, this infinity, this inability to be pinned down. We see everything very clearly. I see you, I see the clothes you're wearing, I see the shapes and the colors and all that, and yet if I really look closely, I can't say what any of it is. I can't say what the experience is. I can't say how it's happening. I can't pin it down. It's an open-end, it's like a fractal or a field of infinity that is just full of so much information, and I can't, and it's not information that lends itself to being delineated, even though it's information that is being very specifically presented. It's hard to put into words, but I think this is a self-discovery of this fact is self-evident. That this experience is obviously immediately present. It's obviously what it is, and yet it's obviously open-ended. It's obviously ungraspable, undefinable. The last word has not been said on it, and will never be said on it. I think humans could live for another billion years and develop in sophistication and intelligence, and scientists still won't be able to say what things are. This is the last word will never be in on what this is, because it's inherently mysterious. And yet, this is not a mystery of inaccessibility. It's right here. It's nakedly present. It's unavoidable.
A previous question was, let me see, where is it? So attention seems to play a great role in this, right? Noticing, I guess. Is attention the same as noticing?
Yes, attention does play a big role in that. And attention and discovery of what attention is. Attention is itself a very mysterious quality.
Okay.
We begin to discover that, we may think of our attention as we may identify with and just think our attention is us, and we're always focused front and present on our thoughts and our narration. But eventually we discover that our attention is very mobile and actually goes all over the place through amazing textures and qualities of experience. We notice this when we're going to sleep at night. We're going to sleep, and at one point we're sort of lying there thinking, and eventually there's sort of we enter some very strange nebulous conditions where we're still present, we're still experiencing, but it's the texture of things begins to change. The relationships of thought begins to change. And this is a flow of attention. And attention can go to the same area. Right at this moment, your attention can go to the same place it goes to when you're going to sleep, because that portion of your experience is all, that strata, so to speak, of your experience, is also here. All qualities of your consciousness are right here, right now. So you can experience what deep sleep feels like right now by putting your attention there. You can experience what falling to sleep looks like right now by putting your attention there. You can experience conscious thought by putting your attention there. You can experience total direct experience outside thought by putting your experience, say, in your sense fields. Put your experience in your field of sight very immediately. That's not conceptual in the least. And so attention, is a word for this amazing mobility. And as we discover that this mobility exists, we discover freedom, because we discover that we can move, more or less freely through the different realms of our experience, instead of being a slave to staying locked into one particular frame of reference or one particular, sort of a interface of way of being engaged with our experience. It's kind of like discovering that your computer has lots and lots of different programs. It doesn't have just a web browser or just a word processor. You can do all kinds of different things. You can multitask, and this is analogous to attention. Our experience is like a vast computer that has all sorts of different subtle software and programs running on it, and we can access these different interfaces if we notice that we have the ability to do so.
My experience tells me that with these experiences that we're talking about, it's often accompanied with a peak of energy.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about, especially since we are typically used to relating to our experience in a more or less fixed mode. When we move to another mode, there's a quality of energy that is present as a surprise, or as a perhaps just as being a sense of newness. We're engaged with a different flavor of energy, and so perhaps it's more radiantly present, or more seemingly more dynamic in our mind. So I think that's true, yeah. But I also think, in my experience, that as we gain more facility with moving through different qualities of our experience, we find this energetic quality is omnipresent, and we get less and less of these jolts or surprises or sort of peak experiences, because it's less shocking to us as we move, as we switch gears, so to speak, or as we re-engage. But I think this is often the case. When we first discover these things, it can be startling, or wow, there's a certain quality of an explosion of energy, or a surprise element, you might call it, or something.
I just find that I'm often trying to grasp what I am.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I wonder, maybe it's not possible. Maybe, and that's kind of a relief sometimes. Maybe it's not possible to really grasp what I am. Maybe maybe I could, I guess that we can sort of be it maybe, but I can't, but I still want to know it, and want to know what I am. But is that a ridiculous request?
You will never know what you are definitively. In other words, you will never know what you are in a way that you can say or capture in thought or capture in a statement or capture in a sentence or a paragraph or a book. But you can know what you are directly through identity. The great spiritual message is that self-realization is possible. It is possible to know what this is. But it's not a knowing which is a grasping. It's not a knowing which is having a definition or a way of delineating it. It is a knowing through identity. You know this the way a dancer knows dancing, by being it, by doing it. And maybe a dancer has facility and can write a book on dancing, but the book on dancing is not dancing. Dancing is itself. And a master dancer knows dancing most intimately by being it, by doing it. And likewise, we can know what this is, we can know what we are by being it, by doing it, because we are it, and we are participating in it. We just need to notice how fully we are participating in every aspect of this. What we call our experience is our being, our embodiment. And we just need to notice what this experience is as a full field, instead of as these partial abstractions of ourselves as a body and an environment and situations and all of these things, which are just partial and very limited interpretations of the experiential field, which includes wholly other non-linear qualities which are not amenable to description. And so when we let go of this addiction to describing, this addiction to defining, and just experience presence, we can experience what is present in the way that it actually is, and experience the reality of this being rather than this conceptual model of it. And in experiencing the reality of this being, we are experiencing the Absolute. We are experiencing reality itself. We're experiencing God. We're experiencing the divine. We're experiencing the Atman. We're experiencing the Self.
It seems like it's helpful to not try to grasp, if I try to understand what I am, it seems like sometimes it's helpful, sometimes not, maybe.
Well, yeah, and this is part of the learning curve, At first we get a hint, wow, this is incredible, there's something here, let me get a handle on it. And so we grasp it, or we try to, but eventually we learn, wait a minute, that doesn't really work. That, what's here does not lend itself to being grasped, doesn't lend itself to being defined. We end up with a definition or with grasping something, but it's some little thing that's not this. We grab for it and we end up with something else, something dead and lifeless in our hands, and there's this incredible, vibrant vitality present that somehow eludes us. And so we do this, this is typical. We naively approach it that way because it would be great. Wouldn't it be wonderful to really just get a handle on it? But eventually we learn through trial and error that, well, gee, what this is, that's not a viable approach. That just doesn't really work. And so then we relax and let go and move into a more mature relationship with it, where we're approaching it in its terms rather than thinking it ought to conform to ours, to our ideas, and the way we've been programmed to thinking we ought to relate to things. And we learn a whole new way of relating. We learn a relationship of flow. We learn a relationship of being. We learn a relationship of infinite nuance. We learn a relationship of qualities that are actually present in this as it is, rather than qualities that we imagine ought to be present, like graspability and definability and all that, which it turns out just don't really apply. But it's a learning curve, We first we do what makes sense, and then we see what works and what doesn't, and we sort of ramp ourselves up into a more mature engagement with what this actually is.
It seems like non-grasping is like the other side of the coin of, like what this man said, the way you described it, about opening the door to noticing for the first time that it's not a thought, the experience is not a thought. That mode, for lack of a better word, that truly experiencing and non-grasping is really to say, like two ways of,
yes,
two sides of the
yes.
same coin.
Yeah, and we discover this. We discover the validity and the power and the lusciousness and nourishing aspect of this through, we stumble onto it and we wow, I get it suddenly. Wow. So that's what they've been talking about. And then we lose it and we fall into our thoughts and we find it again,
which makes it worse.
And so on. But this is typically, it's an ongoing path of discovery. It's an ongoing path of revelation, and we're used to approaching it the way we're used to functioning, and it's not really approachable in that way very directly. And so there's a learning curve of gradually learning what works, what doesn't. And it's very subjective, so we need to find these things for ourselves. It's not like you can just follow a simple recipe or a simple set of directions and get it, unless you're fortunate, because you have to translate this in terms of your own experience, your own actual flow of being. The torch of liberty.
You've silenced us all.
I didn't do anything.
Well, I'll ask a question that that flashed by when you were talking about attention, and I suppose I know the answer, but it's probably worth asking. Is the awareness of reality, is that placing attention on something that would be reality? In other words, you're talking about strata.
No.
You go into the dream state, deep sleep state. I'm really thinking of the paradigm going to Turiya, which is beyond all of them. So
No.
Is that an item in that you can put attention on?
No.
Okay.
No. Placing attention on different aspects of experience is the revelation that experience has many, many, many modes or resonances in its native way of appearing. But realization is of the system itself, not of any of its particular conditions. It's of the whole.
And then that speaks to what was originally being talked about, manipulating consciousness into
Right.
some form called reality.
Yeah, all of these calisthenics that can be done within our experience are interesting as experiments of exploring what consciousness is, but they are not valuable in terms of attaining anything. No, because no one quality or one point of view of experience is superior or inferior to another one. Waking state is not superior or inferior to deep sleep. Conscious mind is not superior or inferior to, say, direct experience of light, say. These things are all just different aspects of the one fact, which is the being of this astounding reality. And it's the reality itself that is of the essence. It's the reality itself, the whole system, that is the point. And it's the discovery of that system. And yet we discover this system through exploring our experience, because our experience is the revelation of what this is. But it's not a subset. Realizing reality does not occur within any portion of it. It occurs within discovering the common denominator of what every portion of it is. And then if you're in the conscious mind, well, that's it. You're deep sleep, well, that's it. You're just blissed out in the full field of your experience, well, that's it. You're caught up in emotionality and being pissed off at some guy that cut you off in traffic, well, that's it. What are they all? They are all this. All of those different possible conditions of experience, what are they? They're this. They're what's happening right here. And what it is inconceivable. And yet it shows up as any of those and all of those, which is probably appropriate closing remarks because it's 9 o'clock. So thank you all so much for coming. And I'll be back here in a couple weeks-ish. First Wednesday of next month, anyway.